My practice is not one of harnessing some unknown force or power. It's not that complex. The richness of loving everything comes in many forms and many levels of understanding. Trust me, I didn't expect that in my 30s I would have a spiritual practice in any form. It's really something my heart had to open to and my mind had to submit to. It's the passionate way, the middle path, one of love and patience with the fleeting nature of all things. Spiritualism, as I consider it, has very little to do with the sect of religion you come from or you choose to associate with. As such, I claim no religion. My practice is in devotion to the interconnected nature of all things. This is God. This is whatever you want to call it, the Tao, if you don't want to call it God, but it's all around us. Before I begin, I did want to say that philosophy is a wonderful tool for understanding the world, but it's not the only thing you have to consider along the journey. How you relate to the world and your place within it is essential to any of the things I'm going to say. You have to know what it means to you, and even if you get some excellent bits of information from me, it will amount to nothing if you cannot apply it practically to your own life. Sometimes this is referred to as the message, right? If you don't get the message, you may not be ready to receive it. That's okay. It'll take time. You may not get it this time around, and that's fine. Just enjoy, sit back, and listen in to the practice of loving everything. It's not hard to be responsive to what arises, like an emotion or a thought. What you do and how you do it plays a very important factor in what we do and how we interact with the world around us. All of these beliefs within the greater span of philosophy that I'm going to talk about are rather loving and compared to something like Stoicism, which is much more objective. And I'm not rejecting the idea of objectively viewing the world at all. I actually embrace that. It's important to be objective when you need to, but the world is too diverse to be one-sided. So knowing what you're objectifying has its own value. Living in acceptance of the way it is brings a lot of clarity in what must be done or not be done, but you must choose. Choosing to not choose, for example, is also a choice. If you get wrapped up in the choice and weighing its merits, there's a lot to consider. You should unburden yourself of that weight. Just do what you perceive to be right and let the results provide the answer. If it wasn't right, then you can accept that it wasn't right. Living without preference isn't living without joy, by the way. Non-attachment doesn't mean non-enjoyment. How can you enjoy something which you do not long for? How does a man take joy in fishing if he makes no catch? It is simply the state that is caused from being engaged in the fullness of the moment or the activity. Between the cast and the catch, there is a competition, a tug of war between the fish and the man or the woman. If you approach it with the right mindset in the spirit of goodwill, the results won't sour your perception. If you win and you manage to reel in a big fish, congratulations, you've won. Similarly, if the fish snaps your line and takes your hook, they got the best of you this time around. There's no shame in the effort for which you attempted to pursue the hunt. It reminds me of Friday Night Lights when Billy Bob Thornton, the movie, by the way, not the show. I like the show too, but when he tells his quarterback that there's not much difference between winning and losing except for how the outside world treats you. This is a foreign concept in our society which values winning and detests losing. If you ain't first, you're last. This is a mentality of suffer or succeed, though I feel that competition is both healthy and rewarding. With the wrong intention, it isn't built to last. When your happiness is dictated by external gratification, it ignores any values you attempt to live by, because who you're serving is not yourself, it's someone else. You still have to live with yourself, and that's why living by your values is so important. Compassion is a mainstay of my philosophy because it brings in what is into our awareness. Not only do you become more understanding of others and their experiences, but you become interested and invested in every facet. This is deeply tied in with love and understanding, which I'll get to later. A compassionate being can recognize the illusions that others may not. This creates opportunity for reflection and recognition of how a circumstance may dictate a response. If we are not caught in our own illusions, our own traps, then we can see those things in others and help them become free, but only if they want to. Someone that wants to become free of their illusions, we may have to assist them, in showing them the way, but they have to make the first step. They have to try and recognize those illusions. This is consciousness. This is awareness. We do it all the time, supporting our friends and our loved ones. Strangers, if they're open to it, can be the most liberated from a compassionate heart. It doesn't always happen, though I will say I just create an environment in which they can be open, and I let them be whoever they want to be. Sometimes it's a pity party, I won't lie. People love to feel bad when it doesn't work the way they thought it was, but that's clinging, and they're suffering because of it. All you can do is recognize the circumstances that are causing them to feel so frustrated or confined. I don't want to be confined, despite my outward flexibility, so I can be compassionate for those who would be. There's empathy. Your heart breaks for their suffering because you know the pain while being fully supportive of the process of accepting that pain, accepting the reality. This is a cycle you can get caught in. Pleasure and pain, gain and loss, it's two sides of the same coin, presence and absence. Yet, in the deepest reality, it's just a matter of clinging to desire. You can desire a steak, but if you get rice and beans, can you make it work? Understanding the way it is can bring a lot of perspective. Most importantly, there's a fine veneer of neutrality. If you see what really is, without investigation of how you feel, things become clear. This is the way it is. It has nothing to do with you. There is no consideration for opinion or impact. What we exist within doesn't confine itself to our desires or preferences. You can consider this the way it is, the world, okay? You say, oh, the world is like that sometimes. But the world is just the reality in which we experience all of these different societal circumstances that we find ourselves in. That's part of the drama that we fail to recognize, is when we don't get what we want, we feel jilted. And this is the first noble truth that Buddha recounted. Suffering is everywhere, and everyone experiences it. It's not to say that understanding the world will mitigate suffering. We live our lives within a scope of comprehension, and in that way, we suffer immensely because of it. That's just the way it is. Supposing you can understand the way it is and view others compassionately for the experience they're undergoing, you're on the path to acceptance. This may pull in some other core tenets that I feel to be extremely valuable. You'll have to be patient with yourself and others as they learn to live with the circumstances. Patience with yourself is so important because you recognize the traps that you're getting caught in. It's funny when you look at it, because in the later stages, you recognize how silly the traps are in relation to the actual problem. What you're actually mad about has very little to do with the issue, and way more to do with your tolerance. You expected it to be a certain way, then you don't get that. How does that change your demeanor? If you're patient enough to see the lessons as teaching moments and you as the student, then you're always in class and every moment is learning about yourself. That's acceptance. You're learning to accept disappointment in the moment. Even though it stings, you remain humble because you're learning how things are and also about how you are. And how you are matters a lot. Recognizing the traps and how you respond is a good indication of where you're at. You can call it maturity. Higher consciousness is a little too advanced for this particular state, but that's the big I. The big I is the higher consciousness, where the lower consciousness is just, it's just the egoic self, if you want to call it that. After all, and all of this to be wrapped up, You will know when you're ready for the next step in that process and becoming a seeker. Contemplation, honesty, and truth go hand in hand. I'm talking about really evaluating where you are. The most valuable lessons I learn are, of course, in my own ruminations, listening to teachings or reading them. I love Ram Dass, Alan Watts, all sorts of people. I read scripture, whether it's from the Bible or from the Bhagavad Gita. I talk to people who are on the path. These all give me a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to ponder. And you'll find that contemplation is a very key aspect to understanding yourself and your understanding of the world. You have to break it down. You can't just say, oh, well, this is the way it is, because it is so much more than that. And you need to think about it. You need to process it. You can call all those people that are, on the path, you could call them spiritual seekers if you need a term, by the way. I love when people ask me what I am, as if some religion defines me. I tell them I'm eclectic, and that's fine. That's an answer that I can provide. And even though my upbringing was Catholic, I'm just too diverse to fit into a category. I sat down with a pastor from a Presbyterian church recently who had so much to offer. He, just a few years older than me, could conceive of the experience of connecting at the soul level. Of course, he's a pastor. You would expect him to be so divinely awakened to see the souls and the spiritualism within it. But he even asked, is God within the confines of the church or within the space between us? And this is so many different things. Tao, God, the universe, the void, the vortex, behind the veil. These are things that you'll ponder on, of course. And though I may be giving you too much credit or myself too many expectations about how far you may come within a short period of time, the particular challenge with spiritual seeking is that the way in which it fulfills us can't be measured by someone else's expectations. What I think you might experience may not even happen in this lifetime, which frankly scares the heck out of people. People expect that they'll find Jesus or connect with God by the time they're on their deathbed, and that is an expectation that you may just have to quell. We all have a journey, and some people get to the end and are just as confused as where they started. And that's where we contemplate. Being honest about your journey and what is really happening in our lives escapes us, mostly because we try to reference it to what we read or, what other people are telling us. My moment of awakening was spurned by LSD and consciousness being interconnected into one another by a web of love, literally love. You need to be honest with yourself about how you perceive things. Contemplating on how things are while being honest about how you're seeing it provides some much needed noodling, and that is so important. Write it down, draw it, think it, meditate on it, pray on it. These are our reflections, and they're mostly our fears, but that is the understanding. That is emotional intelligence at its core. Truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. It's a good quote, though I do recognize it's slightly complex. Truth, of course, escapes us sometimes. When I talk about the truth of how it is or how you're experiencing the world, it's like pinning Jell-O to the wall or collecting a box of grid squares. Recognizing the truth is done from a higher self. And why the higher self? We talked about it a little bit. The lower self has priorities. It wants. The higher self isn't grasping at what could be. It just sees how it is. It's like a cool guy. Hey man, that's just the way it is. It's cool. No worries. Because that's the way it is. You have to be honest about where you're at, even if it doesn't fit with where you want to be. What are you moving towards, and with what intention? There must be truth. What are you really driving to become? If you don't believe you're worthy of something, you might want to reconsider where that worth is coming from. Where are those values, and are they external or are they internal? I've held off on this for a little bit, but love isn't something that you can just express, and love is one of the core tenets of loving everything, right? We've talked about patience with yourself and others. I want to be clear, when I say others, I do want to expand that out to animals of all varieties, plants of all sizes, even ants that find their way into your pantry. You can love them. You can view them as, just another another seeker on the path. They may not even recognize, but they're fully engaged and present. They're not thinking about getting the new PlayStation. They don't care. They don't care about that. They're just looking for some food. And this is the hardest task of all, because we see the exterior of something like an ant or someone that's not desirable within societal norms, and we cast a lot of dispersions, like a transient, a homeless person. They're wearing dirty clothes, they haven't showered in a while, and it would be really easy to mark that person off as a lost cause. And we write them off constantly because we don't know how to have a conversation with people. It's in our own ineptitude in dealing with those unfamiliar, uncomfortable conversations. It's easy to treat people as second-class citizens when you see them as beneath you. Similarly, we look at all the things as pests because it encroaches our space. It could be that ant, but it also could be that annoying neighbor who wants to hang out, But this is where I turn the corner, where it made me love a stranger just like I would anybody else. They are not them. We encompasses everyone. It's the difference that we evaluate and say that they aren't part of our group because we believe that they don't have our best interest in mind. Did you ever consider that the differences are created because we marginalize haves and have-nots? These differences are killing us. So when I look at someone new, someone strange, someone hurting, I see them in reality. They're not some monster. They're susceptible to all those judgments, and the person that's casting those judgments is you. You are the one. If everyone is so different, then aren't we all different? You couldn't possibly torment yourself with all those differences. The reality is that we're living a life on a separate path that coincides with everyone else's path, running parallel along the cycle of birth and death. Call it a cycle, call it one line, whatever religious preference you want. We're all part of it, every single one. Seeing them as us stops those silly lines of status and authority, because in the end, the only authority that really matters is that which you permit. On love, since we're here, you're probably going to struggle with the concept of loving everyone. So why would you love everyone? And that's something we're going to have to wrestle with, both internally, within our own social context, what a good person is, what a bad person is, and how you can love the being they are rather than the acts they commit. It would be very easy, and most people find themselves trapped within this very same construct, is the mistakes that you've made in the past, the decisions you've made in the past. You believe that you can't be forgiven for them. You believe that there is something wrong with you, and you can never return back to that state of grace and acceptance within that social structure. And that's something that's really going to have to, you're going to have to flip that and reevaluate what a good person is, what a bad person is, and how much you can forgive and love someone for just being where they are. In the Tao Te Ching, which is this amazing text, which I've probably read a couple dozen times, I've listened to on YouTube a couple dozen more times, and it continues to be an inexhaustible source of knowledge and wisdom and just perspective that doesn't stand anywhere. In this book, though, there is two lines that make me think of this very situation, which is, what is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? When we step back and recognize, regardless of if you're the good man or the bad man, because I'm certain, as in the Tao also says, the the Tao is the bad man's refuge, the good man's paradise, or something like that. But it's like, these are the realities, that there is no place to stand, that you're not trapped in a place. So you do have to kind of break away from that perception that you're the good one, okay? And that you are just indeed one of many uncountable numbers of people experiencing and just beings in general, okay? I'm sure squirrels don't think about stealing each other's nuts and they're like, oh, I'm a bad squirrel, I'm a good squirrel, Dogs don't think about, oh, I'm behaving badly. We cast those perceptions. So bad and good is very objective. And yeah, it is a challenge. But how can you love everyone? Let's get into that. I don't know anyone. And how can you know anyone if you're caught in the traps of what they did versus who they are? And that's a challenge. You know, we talk about separation and categorization. You probably will not love everyone, and that's fine. You know, you start by analyzing what you do love. Do you love things? Do you love people? Do you love yourself? Could you love yourself fully and with a total understanding of who you are? Can you love yourself fully enough to feel that resonate within you? These are, you know, these are just the first steps. This is like literally stage one. And so if you can love yourself, excellent. Who else do you love and how can you express it? Do you love someone who doesn't love you? We do it all the time if you really consider it. We love celebrities who will probably never love us, yet we don't despair when they don't reciprocate that love. It's a little silly. Now expand it out. Family, you love them. Send that love out. Friends, send that love out. Coworkers, you love them. Between the hours of 9 and 5, send it out. Then start working on loving those cursory people. The grocery store, bagger, the stranger walking down the street. Love them. Love them for what they're doing, who they are. Love them in that space because that's all you can do. I love everyone. Ram Dass was told to love everyone and tell the truth. And he told his guru, Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, that the truth is that he couldn't love everyone. And why couldn't he? It's really important to point and nail down that understanding, because what you don't like about someone isn't actually that person. Everything you don't love is about your perceptions of that person, not the actual individual. The way they look. You are taking offense to that. They're not being anything but who they are, and you are taking offense. That is not you loving them. That is you disliking the way you feel about them. It's very complex, but get it together. These are your perceptions. What you don't love is how you see them based on your perceptions. That is it. A prime example, I had a student call in having issues logging into our website. I asked a few questions, provided the solution that would fix the problem, and they berated me for 7 minutes. I was answering questions. I was trying to help them solve the problem, but they were so caught up in all these other issues that had nothing to do with me. Working 60 hours a week, driving an hour and a half each way every day for work, using our website, talking to me, being told they had to do something, using our service, how much money she paid for her schooling, waiting on hold for me to answer the call, and then finally, me not being able to fix her problem. All of this because it opposed what should be within their mind. Did I dislike them in that moment? Honestly, no. I kind of felt bad for her, for the life she must lead, and the way they must have to walk through the world to shoulder that burden. It's not even my fault that they couldn't log in. I was just a bystander on the path. But you can love them as much as you can. Understand them with compassion. And even if you don't understand, you don't have to understand to be compassionate. I don't have to shoulder the burden of this person's problems for me to understand that they're suffering. And I can just be supportive and friendly. And that call, by the way, I did have to hang up because I still have a preference for not being screamed at. What can I say? I'm still working on that karma. The last two mainstays of my philosophy are fulfillment and practice. Fulfillment happens in the moment, fully engaging with the opportunity as it's presented. You can consider this as living in the now, since nothing happens outside of it. In this present moment, which is only this moment, we are the participant and the witness at the same time. It would be silly to be anywhere else but here. It's a little romantic, and I'm sure you're wondering, well, how is being present romantic? In the present moment, you can fully engage with the world, with yourself, with another person, another being, a dog, the person on the end of the phone, there are so many opportunities for you to admire the sky or the trees or the birds, or it's all accessible. That's why I get so excited about being here, because the truth is that it is much larger than we could ever understand. Everything is happening around us at all times, regardless of how we feel about it. And when you live life presently, as a Zen Buddhist would, as a, just living in the moment for the sake of being there, the moments not only come to you, but so do the answers. There is no wanting for a path because you're smack dab in the middle of it. I do want to say before I get to this last practice, going back to truth, being honest with people and truthful with people can be scary, okay? And I do realize that. I do it every day. I'm constantly being honest about what is really happening, and that pains people. And it scares the person that's being honest because there are so many ways it could go wrong. How will they react? Is this okay? And the reality is that the truth, especially as you express it to others, may not be received well. And that is a sad reality that you just have to deal with. And they have to deal with. No one likes breaking bad news to anyone, but with the right level of understanding about how it is and accepting it within yourself, you can then express that to somebody compassionately and thoughtfully. And in that way, it resolves a lot of those issues. As I stand on the path, just like you do, my greatest task is to practice what I'm talking about. It would be very easy to tell you that you should be compassionate, loving, understanding, accepting, patient, contemplative, honest, truthful, while fulfilling the roles within your lives. Keep in mind, you're living in a role. The roles that we define ourselves as. Oh, well, I'm a father. I'm a this. I'm a learner support. These are all roles that I fulfill, and I try to do them effortlessly, but also excellently, because those are all just applications. That's what you should expect anyone to do at any time, and that's what I hope for you in every moment. But it's not easy. It's called a practice because in every moment we're trying to apply techniques and approaches to something that can only be experienced within the moment by doing. We practice to be ready for whatever, because whatever happens, we want to be ready. I might be going through a given moment, but it's simply the challenge of the moment. If what happens is a death sentence, you must own it as if your life depended on it. When we practice compassion, we ease the expectation that someone needs to meet. When we practice understanding and acceptance, we express it with love and kindness, letting that person off the hook. Contemplation, honesty, and patience provide a space for us to cope with how and what we're experiencing in the world. Fulfilling our duties permits us to fully live in the moment. This is the practice of loving everything.